Welcome to New York, New York, the city of nicknames, the Big Apple, the capital of the world, the city of dreams, the city so nice they named it twice, the city that never sleeps, Empire City, Gotham, Metropolis. When we arrived in New York, we stayed at the Arlo Nomad. Our hotel wasn't quite ready, and so we left our bags and decided to go explore the city. We ended up near Pershing Square and the Grand Central Station. The Grand Central Station is a beautiful building that was bustling and full of people, and it was fun visiting. We then headed to Times Square, which is considered the crossroads of the world because it is one of the busiest pedestrian intersections in the world. Times Square also has around 40 theaters located around it. Close to Times Square is the NFL Experience, and so we had to stop by and see that while our hotel was getting ready. We looked for our favorite AFC South team, the Indianapolis Colts. After the NFL Experience, we got a text that our hotel was ready, so we headed back to the Arlo Nomad Hotel. We had a small room with bunk beds, but it was perfect for us for the next few days. The room was modern and bright, and we enjoyed our time there. We then left again to explore the city, and this is the New York City Public Library. We then headed down to Rockefeller Plaza. We passed the Trump Tower and then made our way to Central Park. Central Park is one of my favorite places in all of New York City. It is just a little oasis in the middle of the city. We visited Central Park Zoo, and here are some clips of our visit there. After leaving the zoo, we just decided to explore and walk around the park a little more. There was always a lot of activity going on in the park and a lot of people to watch. But there are also some peaceful spots where you can just get away and feel like you have the whole place to yourself amidst all the big buildings that surround the park. The park is also used to film many scenes for TV shows, and the day we were there, they were filming a scene from Instinct. After leaving the park, we headed back south toward Midtown. We passed Radio City Music Hall and then Rockefeller Plaza again. That first night we were there, we decided to take a nighttime bus tour of New York City and go into Brooklyn. It was great seeing the New York skyline from the other side of the river. Our tour took us by Lower Manhattan and then up toward the Empire State Building. New York at night is just amazing, and on our way back to the hotel we decided to stop at one of the food trucks. We then stopped by Bryant Park on our way back to our hotel. That next morning we took a city sightseeing bus tour. It was a double-decker bus, and we sat on top as we toured the city and looked at the sights. We went through Times Square again. And then passed by the Empire State Building. We saw the Flatiron Building. And then the bus stopped and we were able to walk on the High Line for a little while. The High Line was an old railroad track that went through the city that they've converted into a pedestrian walkway. It is a beautiful place, and every time I come to New York City I want to walk on the High Line. We then got back on our bus and continued our tour down to Lower Manhattan. There is just so much to see and experience while you are in New York City. One of my favorite things to look at is all the water towers that are on top of the buildings. Lower Manhattan is also known as the Financial District, and at the heart of this is One World Trade Center. It is the Freedom Tower, and it replaced the Twin Towers that were viciously attacked during the 9/11 attacks. The 9/11 Memorial is a very sobering place to visit, but it is a place you must see if you visit New York City. Around the memorial are the names of each and every person that died during the 9/11 attack. And each year, on a person's birthday, a rose is placed on their name. This is the one tree that escaped the 9/11 attack, and this sculpture was made from some of the metal that was recovered. We then headed down to the harbor and got on a sightseeing cruise. A cruise is a great way to see the city. It is wonderful seeing the skyline from the water. During the cruise, we were able to see the New Jersey skyline, and then we passed Ellis Island. But as you look back, you can always see the skyline of Manhattan. But the highlight of the cruise had to be passing the Statue of Liberty. Again, this is the New Jersey side of the river, and then Manhattan. It is just impressive to see how big Manhattan is from the water. After our cruise ended, we decided to walk on the High Line a little bit more. Part of the High Line goes over the train tracks, and it's impressive to see how many trains there were there. When you're in New York City, you have to ride the subway, and we did that quite often. We ended up back in the financial district and stopped by Wall Street. We then saw the Brooklyn Bridge, and then headed back down to the subway station to take a train back to our hotel. That night we visited Madame Tussauds, and it was a fun night. It was raining a little bit and we wanted to spend an evening indoors, and this was a perfect place to spend the evening. The next morning we headed to Top of the Rock, which is the observation deck on the top of Rockefeller Center. We had great views of Central Park and also of the Empire State Building in Lower Manhattan. We left the Top of the Rock and then headed to the MoMA. It is the Museum of Modern Art, and every time I'm in New York City I like to visit this museum. There's just so much to see in the MoMA, and every time I go they have new exhibits. We then headed back to Central Park and took a bike tour around the park. This is the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir. Again, I just love visiting Central Park. It is a wonderful place to spend the afternoon. After leaving Central Park, we got back on the subway and headed just a little south and stopped at the American Museum of Natural History. This is where Night at the Museum was filmed. After leaving the museum, we passed by the Trump International Hotel and Tower and then headed to Gulliver's Gate. Gulliver's Gate is a place filled with miniature cityscapes of famous cities and buildings from around the world, and it was a great place to visit in an evening in New York City. We then jumped on the subway and headed back down to Lower Manhattan to One World Observatory. We wanted to go up and see the city from the top of the Freedom Tower, and the view from there at night did not disappoint. We jumped on the subway again and then headed back to our hotel to spend the evening. The next morning, we headed to visit the most famous arena in the world, Madison Square Garden, and we took a tour of that facility. Around the top of Madison Square Garden is a ring with every date on it and an important event that happened in the garden on that date. So we took a picture of everyone's birthday in our family to see what important things happened in Madison Square Garden on that date. The last time I was here in Madison Square Garden, I was seeing a Drake concert with my oldest son, Noah. But this time, my middle son, Evan, and I just toured the facility. It was amazing to visit the locker rooms. After leaving Madison Square Garden, we decided just to walk around the city a little bit more. I have always been fascinated by the architecture of the buildings in New York City. We then got on another sightseeing bus and headed to Uptown and the Harlem area. We went by the famous Apollo Theater. Saw some beautiful sculptures, and then headed back toward Central Park. We decided to stop at the Guggenheim Museum, and we were glad we did. It is located on Manhattan's Upper East Side. We then stopped at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Met is the largest art museum in the United States. And it is the third most visited art museum in the entire world. After leaving the Met, we headed to the subway again and then headed down toward Lower Manhattan. We spent our last evening in New York City at Lower Manhattan, watching the boats come and go and enjoying the beautiful sunset. The next morning, before we had to catch our plane back to Indiana, we went to the top of the Empire State Building. Seeing New York City from the top of the Empire State Building was a great way to finish my trip there with my son Evan. We had a great experience and I can't wait to come back in a few years with my son Wade. New York, you've been good to me again, and I can't wait until I'm able to visit again sometime soon.